Good morning and welcome back. Myself Dr. JIBRAN Ahmed presents to you Simply Pathology, and today we are back with another very important lecture. So today we are going to discuss about amyloidosis part 2. So in the previous lecture we have already discussed the definition of amyloidosis, the pathogenesis and the classification. Today we are going to go a little bit more further and we are going to discuss about the classification of amyloidosis in details. We are also going to discuss about the morphology, clinical features and the diagnosis of amyloidosis, including the different kinds of stains that we use. So without wasting any time, let us begin. So firstly, we are going to discuss about the systemic amyloidosis in details. So first, under systemic amyloidosis, we are having primary amyloidosis. As you know, it is the most common form of amyloidosis, and it is a type of amyloidosis which is associated with monoclonal plasma cell disorders. One of the examples of plasma cell disorder is multiple myeloma. Now, the amyloid in this category is of AL type, and most commonly it is composed of lambda chain, lambda chain of immunoglobulin, and it occurs in just 5 to 15% of the patients with multiple myeloma, meaning that not all the patients of multiple myeloma will suffer from amyloidosis. Just 5 to 15% of such patients will suffer from multiple myeloma, from amyloidosis. The most common cause of death in the primary amyloidosis is cardiac failure. And remember that the primary amyloidosis is often involving the heart, GI tract, respiratory tract, peripheral nerves, skin and tongue. Now remember that the malignant plasma cells, as those plasma cells which are monoclonal in nature, for example in multiple myeloma, they produce two kinds of thing. One is they are going to produce abnormal amounts of monoclonal immunoglobulin, that is the antibodies. That is why this disorder is also called as monoclonal gammopathy, because just a single type of antibody is getting produced. Now this particular monoclonal immunoglobulin is also called as the M protein, and they produce a characteristic M protein spike on serum electrophoresis. Also these plasma cells, these abnormal malignant plasma cells, they produce abnormal amounts of unpaired kappa or lambda immunoglobulin light chain. Now if you are wondering what is a light chain, just let me tell you, clear you out. Any antibody has two parts. One is the heavy chain, one is the light chain. So when I am using the term monoclonal immunoglobulin, it means they are just producing the whole antibody comprising of the heavy chain and the light chain. But when I am saying the free light chains, meaning they are just producing the free light chains, that is kappa light chain or the lambda light chain. So they are producing abnormal amounts of unpaired kappa or lambda immunoglobulin light chain. Unpaired means that they are not paired with the heavy chain. They are unpaired. They are in the free form. And such free light chains are called as the Benz-Jones proteins. These light chains are deposited extracellularly as amyloid. Remember one thing, that the amyloidogenic potential of any particular light chain is determined or dependent on the specific amino acid sequence. Moving ahead, remember that greater proportion of the myeloma patients with free light chains in serum and urine do not develop amyloidosis. As I already mentioned before, that only 5 to 15% of the multiple myeloma patients are developing amyloidosis. Remember that most people with AL type of amyloid do not have the classic multiple myeloma or other B-cell neoplasm. So what we are trying to say is that first you have to understand that not all cases of multiple myeloma will suffer from amyloidosis, and those cases of multiple myeloma which are suffering from amyloidosis, even they do not have the classical features of multiple myeloma. The clinical features in such multiple myeloma patients are because of amyloid deposition only, and just the patient is coming to you because of that amyloid deposition only. That is why such cases of multiple myeloma, we call it as the primary amyloidosis. Here the features are basically primarily because of amyloid deposition, and they do not have the classical features of underlying plasma cell disorder. And remember, in all such cases, the monoclonal immunoglobulin or the free light chain, they are present in serum or urine. Now moving ahead, we are going to discuss about another form of systemic amyloidosis, that is the secondary amyloidosis. It is also known as the reactive systemic amyloidosis, and it occurs mainly because, and it is basically because of deposition of AA type of amyloid. Remember, it is associated with multiple chronic inflammatory conditions, most commonly being the rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease and ankylosing spondylitis. So these three are the most common, and out of them rheumatoid arthritis is the most common variety. Okay, now previously remember secondary amyloidosis was very common in chronic osteomyelitis, TB and bronchiectasis. Now all such conditions is rarely associated with amyloidosis because of the advent of antibiotic therapy. Now there are also certain solid tumors which are associated with secondary or AA type of amyloidosis. This is the renal cell carcinoma and the Hodgkin's lymphoma. Okay, moving ahead, you also have to remember that heroin abusers who inject subcutaneously, they have a very high recurrence rate of generalized AA type of amyloidosis, because the major reason over here is chronic inflammation, that is the chronic skin infection. So what is the pathogenesis of the secondary amyloidosis? Now here the chronic inflammation is causing the release of several interleukins and cytokines like interleukin 1 and interleukin number 6, that is going to stimulate the liver to produce an acute phase reactant, that is serum amyloid associated protein, that is SAA. Remember, you have to remember one thing, that just increased production of serum amyloid associated or SAA protein does not cause your amyloidosis. Okay, the cause is different. What is the cause? Let us see. Remember that normally this acute phase reactant, that is SAA, is normally degraded to soluble end product by monocyte derived enzymes. Okay, if there is any defect in this enzyme system, then this SAA becomes insoluble and they deposit in the tissues in the extracellular space, causing amyloidosis. Secondly, because of a genetically determined structural abnormality in the SAA molecule, which becomes resistant to degradation by the macrophages. Again, there is an insoluble AA protein that gets deposited extracellularly, causing amyloidosis. Remember, so therefore just an increased production of SAA is not sufficient to cause amyloidosis. Okay, the mechanisms responsible for degradation of the SAA fails, giving rise to the AA type of amyloidosis. Also remember one thing, that the most common chronic inflammatory disorder associated with the secondary amyloidosis is rheumatoid arthritis. Okay, now moving ahead, remember that the secondary amyloidosis typically affects the liver, kidney, spleen, thyroid and adrenals. Okay, so now we are going to go to the third type of systemic variety of amyloidosis, that is hemodialysis associated amyloidosis. Now here remember that the patients on long-term hemodialysis for renal failure, they develop beta-2 microglobulin type of amyloidosis. Now why this happens? Because of the deposition of the beta-2 microglobulin protein, as this particular protein cannot be filtered through the dialysis membranes, so their levels increase in the circulation and then they go and deposit extracellularly. It is basically depositing in the joints, muscles, tendons or ligaments, but does not involve the bone. Therefore, the most common symptom is the carpal tunnel syndrome. So now we are going to discuss about the second major variety of amyloidosis, that is heredofamilial or the hereditary type of amyloidosis. Okay, so remember the heredofamilial type of amyloidosis is quite rare. So among them, the most prominent, the first one is the familial Mediterranean fever. It is the most common form of hereditary amyloidosis, autosomal recessive in nature, and it is characterized by recurrent attacks of fever with inflammation of the serosal membranes. Now the increased inflammation and fever occurs because of excessive production of interleukin 1, and it occurs because of mutation in the genes which are encoding pyrin protein. Now the amyloid deposition over here is of AA type. Looking at the second variety of the familial amyloidosis is the familial amyloid polyneuropathy. Now it is an autosomal dominant condition, okay, and here the amyloid deposits, they are composed of mutant transthyretin or mutant TTR variety, and amyloid deposition is classically occurring in the peripheral and the autonomic nerve. So with this we complete the hereditary variety of amyloidosis, and lastly we are going to discuss the localized amyloidosis. So the localized amyloidosis, let us see. So they are basically confined to the single organ or tissue, and here it is characterized by nodular deposit of amyloid in the lungs, larynx, skin, urinary bladder, tongue region around the eye. Remember that few cases they might be of AL type, representing localized plasma cell derived amyloid. Now among the localized amyloidosis, first is the endocrine type of amyloid. Herein we see that there are many kinds of tumors, okay, which are secreting certain hormones or certain proteins, which is basically misfolded and deposited as amyloid. So firstly we are going to see the medullary carcinoma of thyroid. Here the deposit is ACAL. Then we are having islet tumor of pancreas. Here the deposit is IAP, okay. And then we are having pheochromocytoma. So these are the endocrine tumors which are associated with amyloid deposition. Even in non-tumor conditions like type 2 diabetes mellitus, there is a deposit in the islets of Langerhans. Okay. Now, second localized is the Alzheimer's disease, where we have the A-beta amyloid deposition in the cerebral blood vessels as well as in the plaques. Then we are having isolated atrial amyloidosis involving the heart, where there is a deposit of ANF type of amyloidosis. That is, ANF stands for atrial natriuretic factor. And fourthly, we are having the Prion's disease with APR-PSC deposition. Okay. Now there is another kind of amyloid that is called as amyloid of aging. Okay, previously it was called as senile cardiac amyloidosis, since they predominantly involve the heart. It is a systemic type of amyloidosis involving elderly persons of 70s or 80s, and it predominantly affects the heart, creating dysfunction of the heart. Clinically they represent as restrictive cardiomyopathy or even arrhythmias, and the amyloid is basically derived from the normal transthyretin called as normal TTR. So with this we have ended the different the classification in details. Okay, now we are going to discuss in details the morphology of amyloidosis, how they look like. Okay, so morphology. Okay, so if you look, the primary amyloidosis, as I already discussed, is involving the heart, GI tract, respiratory tract, peripheral nerve, skin and the tongue. The secondary variety of amyloidosis is involving the kidneys, liver, spleen, lymph node, adrenals and thyroid, whereas in the hereditary variety, the familial Mediterranean fever is involving widespread systemic deposition, whereas the other varieties, they are localized. So grossly, if you see any organ which is involved by amyloidosis, they are enlarged and the tissue appears grayish with a waxy and firm consistency. And if you look in H&E stain, the amyloid deposition is always extracellular, and it begins between the cells, often close to the basement membrane, and in time they are going to cause pressure atrophy and they will destroy the cell and the parenchymal tissue. So in primary amyloidosis, remember, there is also perivascular and vascular deposits. So first we are now going to start with the kidneys. Remember, very important MCQ, it is the most common and the most serious site of involvement of amyloidosis. Okay, grossly if you see, the kidneys may be of the normal size initially, but in advanced cases you will see that the kidney is shrunken because of the vascular narrowing which has been induced by the deposition of the amyloid within the arterioles and arteries. Okay, H&E, if you see, the amyloid deposits primarily in the glomerulus, but interstitial peritubular arteries or tubules can also be affected by amyloid deposition. So if you see the basic pattern of deposition, the glomerular deposits, okay, first causes the thickening of the mesangial matrix. That is followed by the widening of the basement membrane of the glomerular capillaries. That is followed by the capillary lumen narrowing plus distortion of the glomerular vascular tuft, and ultimately it leads to capillary lumen obliteration, and the glomerular architecture is almost obliterated by massive accumulation of amyloid. And the most common presentation of amyloidosis of the kidney is massive proteinuria, that is nephrotic syndrome. So if you look at this diagram, here the kidneys are enlarged and the cut surface is having a very waxy, appearance, pale, firm and a waxy appearance of the kidney involved by amyloidosis, if you can see over here. Okay, now if you look under the microscopy, I have already shared one image in the previous lecture. Here you see the glomerulus are the ones which are classically involved with the amyloid deposited, and here if you see the amyloid deposits also in the arteriolar walls as well. Now next organ that is commonly involved is the spleen, which is showing moderate to marked splenomegaly. The size of the spleen increases up to 800 grams. Now here classically we are having two patterns. One is the sago spleen, one is the lardaceous spleen. So in the sago spleen we see that there is a localized amyloid deposit involving splenic follicles. Okay, and grossly it is giving rise to a tapioca like granule appearance. That is why it is called as sago spleen. Okay, so what is sago? Sago is basically, in Hindi we call it as the sabudana. We will show you the image, okay, in the next clip. Now in the lardaceous spleen, the basic amyloid deposition occurs. It is involving the splenic sinuses and the connective tissue framework, classically in the red pulp, and there is a fusion of the early deposits giving rise to large map-like areas of the amyloid. That is why we call it as a lardaceous spleen. So if you look at this image, this is the sabudana. So in case of sago spleen, okay, when you cut the spleen, the cut surface shows multiple nodular deposits like sago grains. That is why it is called as a sago spleen. But if you see on the right hand side, we are having your classical lardaceous spleen, where you have map like areas of amyloid deposition, and you can classically see the how much the spleen has been enlarged, and they have a grayish pale waxy appearance. Okay, now this is the classically this is the HNE of the spleen, showing the amyloid deposition, that is a pinkish amorphous eosinophilic hyaline deposition, which has classically involved the red pulp. Okay, this is amyloid deposition in the red pulp of the spleen. Now moving ahead, if you see the next organ of involvement is the liver. There is a marked to moderate hepatomegaly. Amyloid first is depositing in the space of disc, that is encroaching on the adjacent hepatocytes and the sinusoids, and that is creating deformity and pressure atrophy of the parenchymal tissue, that is the hepatocytes, and the replacement of large portions of liver parenchyma is leading to liver failure. LFT is normal despite severe involvement of the liver. The liver function test come out to be normal. So these are very, very important points. Now the heart. Remember, the heart may be involved in any form of systemic amyloidosis. It is a major organ involved in senile systemic amyloidosis. Okay, it may be enlarged. So microscopically, if you see, the amyloid deposition begins as focal subendocardial accumulation and within the myocardium between the muscle fibers. Okay, then this is followed by expansion of these deposits, which causes pressure atrophy of the myocardial fibers. Okay, remember that the subendocardial deposits may damage the conduction system of the heart, leading to abnormal ECG findings. Okay, now other organs which are involved, let us see which are the other organs which are involved and how do they present. So nodular deposits in the tongue will present with macroglossia. It is also called as the tumor forming amyloid of the tongue. Now if you look at the respiratory system, there can be a focal or diffuse involvement. In the CNS, as in case of Alzheimer's disease, there is deposition present in the plaques as well as in the cerebral blood vessels. In familial amyloidotic neuropathy, amyloid deposits in the peripheral and autonomic nerves, and in patients who are on long-term dialysis, as I already told you, the amyloid deposits in the carpal ligament of the wrist, presenting with carpal tunnel syndrome. So now, how will a patient of amyloidosis present? What are the clinical features? So let us see. So clinical features, remember, initially it is non-specific clinical feature, which is followed by weakness, weight loss, lightheadedness, and syncope. So depending on the organ of involvement, for example, if there is a renal amyloidosis, then there will be proteinuria presenting with nephrotic syndrome, progressive destruction of the glomerulus presenting with renal failure and uremia. At the level of the heart, there can be insidious or gradual development of congestive heart failure, conductive defects and arrhythmias which might prove to be fatal, restrictive cardiomyopathy, as well as chronic constrictive pericarditis. Now, in the GI tract, it may be asymptomatic. Tongue, if involved, okay, can become, big. There is macroglossia, which can hamper the speech and swallowing. Deposition in the stomach and the intestine can lead to malabsorption, diarrhea, and indigestion. At the level of the vessels, okay, it can lead to vessel wall fragility, ultimately causing bleeding. And AL amyloid sometimes bind and also inactivates the factor number 10, that is an important clotting factor, and that can also lead to bleeding disorder, which can be life-threatening. Okay, so remember a few important points, that the most common cause of death in amyloidosis, in primary amyloidosis, is cardiac failure. In secondary amyloidosis is renal failure, and overall the most common cause of death is the cardiac failure. So most common organ involved is the kidney, and the most severely affected organ is also the kidney. So now we are going to discuss the second leg, that is the diagnosis of amyloidosis. This is a very, 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 very important question that comes in exam, both for undergraduate as well as postgraduate. So the diagnosis of amyloidosis depends on the histological demonstration of amyloid deposits in the tissues. So the site of biopsy, okay, so if it is an isolated organ amyloidosis, then the affected organ is the site of biopsy. For example, in case of renal amyloidosis, kidney is the site of biopsy. In case of systemic amyloidosis, it is the rectal biopsy, abdominal subcutaneous fat aspirates, or the gingival tissue. So these are the sites of biopsy in case of systemic amyloidosis. Now moving ahead, remember that the most common and the best site for biopsy as of now for screening of amyloidosis is the abdominal fat aspirate, followed by rectal biopsy in case of systemic amyloidosis. So grossly on cut surface of the organ, remember we all know that the cut surface of the organ is pale waxy in nature temperature, and if you put iodine, it will give yellowish color in areas of amyloid deposition, and if you treat those areas with sulfuric acid, it is going to give bluish violet color. So microscopic examination, if you do under the hematoxylin and eosin stain, there will be an extracellular homogeneous eosinophilic hyaline material deposit, and in the Congo red staining, as we already discussed, under ordinary light we are having pink or red color, but this is not diagnostic. But under the polarizing microscopy, you will have apple green birefringence, which is diagnostic of amyloidosis. Thirdly, we are having thioflavin T and S, which produces bright yellow fluorescence. Okay, and number 4, we are having many metachromatic stains like methyl violet and crystal violet, which is producing reddish purple color. Now you have to note that the silver stains are never used for detection of amyloid protein. The next line of investigation is scintigraphy with radio-labeled serum amyloid P protein. It is a very rapid and specific test which is giving the measure of the extent of amyloidosis, and it is also used to monitor the patients of amyloidosis, for follow-upping the patients and to monitor the progression of amyloidosis. Okay. Next, we will have to understand one thing, that this SAP scintigraphy, it is unable to visualize amyloid within the cardiac tissues. So for visualizing the amyloidosis in the cardiac tissues, bone scanning method, that is DPD scintigraphy, is used, as it can detect cardiac involvement by amyloidosis. Now immunohistochemistry on amyloidosis, it is basically used for typing of the amyloid, means which type of amyloidosis is there. So AA, AL and ATTR type of amyloidosis can be distinguished by specific immunohistochemical staining. Now laser microdissection again is a very advanced level of diagnosis. It is basically proteomics, which is used for typing of amyloid. And lastly, in case of AL type of amyloidosis, we have to carry out certain extra investigations like serum and urine protein electrophoresis, as well as immunoelectrophoresis and bone marrow aspiration, which shows monoclonal plasma cytosis. Hope you have enjoyed these 2 series of lectures on amyloidosis, and thank you for watching this lecture. Please do subscribe to my channel, and please do post in comments in case of any doubts. Thank you very much, guys.